If you're a beginner, ink and wash is a great way to play around with watercolor without all the pressure being on the painting part. In this video, I'm sharing 3 examples of how you can approach this window that are easy, a little wonky, but ultimately fun. If you aren't familiar with ink and wash style, it's basically just an ink line drawing with watercolor wash. For this style to work, it's best to have a waterproof pen, although you don't have to have one. And I'll get to that a little bit later in this video. A lot of people will use fountain pens, but you really don't need anything fancy. Basically, you just need a pen that's not going to bleed once you put water on it. If you aren't sure if the ink pen that you have is waterproof, then just draw some lines, wait for it to dry, and brush it with water to see if it bleeds. As for paper, you don't need to stress too much about this. I used watercolor postcards for these little window sketches, but you can use mixed media paper or any paper that can handle wet media. So let's dive into the 3 ways I did ink and wash style for this one window. This first set of windows is actually from a recording of a live Zoom call that I had with my membership community, Paint With Me. So I apologize for the quality of the video, but I did time lapse it so you could see the whole process quickly. And what we did was explore 2 different styles to approach this. Both are meant to be exercises that are loose and fun, and in no way a final piece, or at least not with the expectation that they would be final pieces. They're more like exercises and practice. So the first exercise with this window was to experiment with doing a single line contour and then putting a wash over it. I like the idea of single line contour being wonky and imperfect, so again, setting those expectations and knowing as you go into it that it's not going to be perfect, and I think that's a really great way to loosen up. And in case you might not know, a single line contour basically means that you pick a point to start at and you begin drawing and you do your best to draw it all without picking up your pen. If you do pick it up, you just put it back down and you start where you left off, making the whole drawing a continuous line of contour. So you're basically moving about, looking at the reference photo and following the contours of the subject matter. Once the sketch is done, you can then go back and add color with watercolor. You may want to, or maybe you might even feel forced to, keep the painting loose because the lines will likely be loose and a bit wonky, as you can see mine are. I personally try to keep the watercolor wash as loose as possible. I did it in this case because I wanted to keep the whole thing kind of wonky. I think you can decide what you'd like to do. You could get more detailed with the watercolor wash, but I really feel like because of the contour lines and because it's going to be probably more likely than not a wonky sketch, there won't really be a place for you to be a perfectionist about where the watercolor goes. So my encouragement is to stay washy with it, stay loose, and let go of trying to make the watercolors really precise. This second approach is something I don't do often, but I have seen others do, and I've seen them do it beautifully. I don't have a lot of experience doing it, so doing this with the group on the live call was really a chance for me to experiment and challenge myself too. What we're doing is basically applying a loose wash of color first, and then applying ink lines later. You'll have to wait for the watercolor to dry completely before coming back to do the ink lines, or else your ink lines will bleed all over the place. And with this approach, you don't necessarily have to have a waterproof pen because you're not washing watercolor or water over the pen. So if you don't have a waterproof pen, this is the option to try. My tip for painting the wash portion is to grab the big areas of color and drop in approximately where it might go, not worrying about details or shadows. Simply just put down some color and try your best to let it go. For me, what I did was just grab the wall color, some of the wood color, and marked where some of the wood frame was going to be and then where the foliage was going to go, and I left it at that. When the paint has dried, you can come back and draw your ink lines over the colorful areas. I quite like how it turned out ultimately because the wash just kind of went wherever it wanted to go, and I sketched on top of it, which created a really nice soft look. This third approach that I'm showing you here is more of my standard way of going about ink and wash. I don't necessarily want it to look as detailed as it turns out. I actually would rather it be looser, which is part of the reason why I did those first 2 exercises, because this is the version that I filmed first. This is the one that's my natural instinct to do. I sketch first with pencil and then ink lines, and then I apply watercolor over the top. It's definitely a method that is very straightforward, and so I would encourage you to give it a try if you haven't done it before, because I think a sketch allows you time to figure it out, gives you a map of where to go. Then you can trace the lines with ink, and then you can wash with watercolor. It seems much more, to me, a step-by-step process, and it gives you the chance to control it a bit more. The outcome is totally different, so I think it's really worth trying a bunch of different ways. There are 3 ways here, and hopefully you give at least one of them a try. But I really love exploring all different approaches because it teaches me something, shows me different results, and gives me things to think about for what I do in the future. If you give this little window a try, let me know how it goes in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.